What's up, everyone? We're here for post-game Locked On Bucks as Milwaukee completely blow the doors off the Chicago Bulls, which if you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan, that's always a satisfying experience. The Bucks were great. Defensively, one of their better performances of the season, and they had their big men back. They were playing some big lineups in this game. It was an interesting game for sure as the Bucks continue to run to the postseason. So let's break it down.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on the show Monday to Friday and also find some other work of mine over at ESPN. Joining me, the founder of brewhoop.com, longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden. Of course, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen or first watch of every single day. And I'm sure Bucks fans will be waking up after this one feeling pretty good, Frank. There was a little bit of noise from the Bulls fans when they hit some early buckets, but after that, it was all done. And the night ended with Marcus Johnson making fun of some Bulls fan with a red wig on in the Fiserv Forum crowd. So all things considered, this was a good night for the Bucks. I saw you tweet some numbers out, but to me, the big takeaway from this, obviously, Brook Lopez into the starting lineup alongside Giannis for the first time. You tweeted it, first time since opening night, which feels like a long time ago. And maybe was their other most impressive win of the season when those two started alongside each other. But the defense was certainly across the four quarters, including the third quarter, pretty pleasing tonight for sure. And I was watching the Bucks in the third quarter, Frank, and we know Chris Middleton missed this game with wrist soreness. I thought you were going to miss this podcast with wrist soreness after the Bucks won a third quarter. So how do we feel about that?
Well, Giannis had nine turnovers, so feel free. Giannis had 9 turnovers, so that kept me from getting too lathered up tonight, game. But yeah, I mean,
oh boy,
the third quarter thing has been just one of these things that just like sort of confounds me. And it's funny. I was thinking the other night, it's like, would I be more confident in a Bucks win if they were down 10 going into the fourth quarter or down 10 going into the third quarter? Which, okay, I'm not saying I would actually prefer being down 10 going into the fourth quarter, but it really just feel like, especially after the Minnesota game, like, if there's always something bad on the verge of happening in third quarters. And tonight, it really was wire, more or less wire to wire. Bulls, had a couple early leads when Vucevic was hitting some jump shots, but Bucks, really go on the big run. What was it, 13-0 to end the first quarter? As again, they were just forcing the Bulls to take mid-range jump shots. I thought they, just did a really nice job sort of dictating the terms of engagement on both ends for the most part. And those, points in the paint numbers, whatever it was, like 58-34 or 54-38, whatever it was, really spoke to the fact that basically the Bulls had to shoot jump shots. And I think the piece that, is encouraging about this, and I talk about this a fair bit, right? About, the real kind of encouraging wins, I think, are the ones where it's not just a three-point blitz where you just make a ton of threes and the other team has a bad shooting night, and that's the whole reason. Bucks 12 out of 28, 43%. They shot the ball well from three, but they didn't shoot. I mean, that's well below their season average in terms of attempts. And the Bulls were 13 to 33, 39%. So, again, Bucks shot slightly better, but the Bulls actually made one more three. And it was really everything inside the arc. It was not fouling. It was grabbing defensive rebounds. It was making, using all that size. Giannis 3 blocks, Brook a couple blocks, Serge Ibaka added a block. Using their size to really just make it really hard on the Bulls. And credit Wes Matthews, 11 points tonight, stepping into Chris's spot in the starting lineup. He's again made another couple threes. So knock on wood that his 3-point shooting is going to stick around for a while. I thought, he did a nice job along with Drew Holiday and George Hill, and just sort of like the group in general. Javon Carter, again, kind of applying pressure like the Bucks guards. I thought did just a nice job staying disciplined on the Bulls' wings, forcing them into taking hard shots. And we know that DeMar DeRozan can make hard shots, but 21 points on 23 shots tonight, that feels kind of charitable. He started hitting some shots when they were down big in the third quarter. And the fact that, we saw, again, the run at the end of the first quarter, we saw the big run in the second quarter, Brook Lopez, vintage heat check. Brook Lopez getting a block, hitting a three, hitting another three. Just looking, you can tell after the game, he was just feeling really, I mean, I think he does really feel blessed and just so thankful to be back playing basketball. His first game in front of home fans since opening night. And, Bulls fought back into it. They got it to within, I think, 10 or 11 a couple times in the third quarter. And then the Bucks, something they have not typically done, is they basically responded and came back and kept playing their game. And ultimately, they win that third quarter 32-26. They win the fourth 35-29, even though it was a blowout most of the time. And, I don't know how the last time the Bucks won four quarters out of a game, but tonight they do that. And, I think the 126-98 number, that first time in 18 games that they held an opponent under 100, I thought they really earned it, right? This wasn't just again, Bulls were on the second night of back-to-back, but you're playing without Chris Middleton. So certainly from an injury perspective, yes, the Bulls are still missing Lonzo Ball, but I mean, otherwise they got Pat Williams back. They got Alex Caruso back. He struggled tonight. Not a ton of excuses for why, the Bulls should have been an easy mark tonight in terms of health and some of those things. And I just thought the Bucks showed why they're obviously just a better team.
Yeah, I think Chris Middleton cancels out the Lonzo Ball absence anyway, but certainly it's a different Bulls team to what we've seen previously where they've had significant pieces coming out. And we know Caruso, hasn't played a whole lot of games, and you mentioned the back-to-back. But nonetheless, the Bulls now, this is a stat that doesn't even make sense, Frank. 0-16 against the top three teams in either conference. Like, how do you not fluke a win in this NBA where players are missing games and schedule stuff that always goes on? It's absolutely ridiculous. But not only are they 0-16, a lot of those games have been absolute beatdowns as well. So it's hard to tell if this is some serious fraudulent behavior from the Bulls so far in the regular season, but they haven't fared well against the better teams in the league. The other number you referenced in your tweet was the defensive rebounding percentage. And and Eric always tweets out these numbers. And when he tweeted it out at the end of the first quarter and the Bucks had 100% defensive rebounding percentage, I was thinking, geez, the boys are switched on, certainly. And we talk about it all the time, the impact that Brook Lopez can have. Now, I'm not saying it's just him, but we've seen his minutes go up, over these last few games here. Tonight, he actually got up to 24, and who knows if it was a closer game, whether he would have played more minutes. But I do think, again, we've spoke about the amount of time Giannis has had to spend playing at center. But tonight, when you look at the box score and it's 58 to 34 points in the paint, you're like, okay, that's starting to look a little bit more like vintage Bucks box scores over the last few regular seasons. And there was at least one play where I can't remember who the Bulls player was, but he was driving. It was kind of semi-transition. He's driving the ball at Serge Ibaka. Ibaka's backing back. And we've spoke, is Serge Ibaka prime on defense? Not really. But then here comes Giannis and just flies over the top, blocks the shot. And I'm like, okay, now the Bucks in whatever matchup they want, and they can go small, and Giannis will still close games at the 5, I'm sure, in certain matchups and those types of things. But we saw a lot of Serge and Giannis. We saw Serge and Bobby Portis. We saw Brook Lopez and Giannis. And for a team that for much of the year has looked pretty small, all of a sudden they just looked absolutely gigantic again. And Chicago thought, well, look, all right, well, we'll roll out Tristan Thompson again. And we've already seen how that plan goes. Not well. The only thing that he's done well all season so far is talking whatever rubbish he was before the game. And then he got into it with Serge Ibaka. And by the way, I thought that was good restraint by Serge to just give a little forearm or whatever he did there. Because we've seen Serge Ibaka can get a little hot under the collar in years previous. He's had a few incidents over the years.
Yeah, sir. It was a really smart play. The only smart thing Tristan Thompson did today was the fact that when he got in that little
let it go.
Match, he just I would say he just grabbed him. He just locked up Serge because Serge has had a number of instances where he just starts randomly throwing haymakers at dudes. And I mean he's one of the few guys who's gotten a multi-game suspension because he has a history of doing that. I forget who it was. I think it was somebody on the Cavs maybe a couple of years ago.
Didn't he get into it with Robin Lopez?
I think he did. Yeah. I think that was a while back. Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah. When he was in Toronto and Robin, I think maybe it was in Chicago. They got into I think I saw a video of that the other day, and Robin looked like he was kind of like play acting a WWE part almost. But anyway, so Serge Ibaka, a little bit of that John Wayne toilet paper, rough, tough, doesn't take shit off anything. And I think I don't know that we framed it as much when they acquired Ibaka that, part of the acquisition here is bringing toughness, but he's definitely a guy that does not stand for like shenanigans. And again, sometimes I'm not saying that he's not always sometimes sort of like the instigator or that he's not always sort of overreacting. I mean, there's 2 straight games where he's gone nose to nose with somebody. First time it was Pat Bev. So like, I'm just going to blame Pat Bev on that because
Yes.
it's Pat Bev. But tonight, again, we see it with him and Tristan Thompson. And yeah, but again, Tristan Thompson's smart. Wrap up Serge's arm so you can't start throwing those big punches at you, which is good too. I mean, we don't want Serge getting suspended again. But yeah, and I thought it was interesting. I mean, the Bulls can throw some size at you, right? I mean, Pat Williams. We've been hearing all year long about how the Bulls needed to get Alex Caruso back. They need to get Pat Williams back, and of course Lonzo Ball back, and that's kind of been the missing ingredients for them defensively. But this is kind of the hard part, right? I mean, you look at both teams a little bit. Bucks have not, fallen quite as badly, down the standings and in the defensive ranks as the Bulls have over the past few months. But I think there's been this sort of expectation that, well, when Caruso comes back, when Pat Williams comes back, if Lonzo Ball comes back, he's been shut down again for another 10 days. When those guys come back, then okay, then we can be good again defensively. And the hard part is like, it's not always that easy. And I think the Bucks have had to kind of worry about falling into the same trap of like, oh, well, when Brook comes back, then we can be good at defense again. And I was definitely a little concerned, right? I mean, it's probably going to take Brook a little bit to kind of get his feel back. And the same token, it's like we all remember last year, right? Let's not forget, especially during the regular season, a lot of people were complaining about how Bucks defense, even with Brook Lopez, was not performing at that high of a level. The 3-point shooting percentage are really high against the Bucks, probably unlucky last year. But there were a lot of complaints about Brook Lopez and kind of what that drop scheme meant to the Bucks defense. So interesting parallel, thankfully, if you're a Bucks fan. The return of Alex Caruso, the return of Pat Williams did very little. As much as those guys, I think, thought Pat Williams did a perfectly respectable job against Giannis. Giannis had a ton of turnovers. I think a couple, 2, 3 of them looked like he got fouled, no call. So it goes. And Caruso, obviously, we know what a pest he can be defensively, but I mean, it's hard though. It's like those 2 guys cannot by themselves turn around an entire defense. And we saw Drew Holiday, as good as Alex Caruso is, when he was going at Caruso, Caruso couldn't really stop him from getting to his spots, and Drew was terrific again, which was especially important on a night. Obviously, when you're missing Chris, you only have 2 of the big 3. You really want both of those guys to deliver, and certainly Giannis not so much with the turnovers, but 9 out of 12 from the field, 25 points. Drew, what Drew have? 20? Did he Drew have 27 tonight?
27.
Yeah, I mean 27 points on 17 shots. So he was terrific, 7 assists and no turnovers. So Giannis pretty much had 9 of the 14 turnovers tonight. So yeah, it was just I think just an all around nice effort. And again, you had role players doing role player stuff. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about the bench, but I think certainly as far as Serge Ibaka goes, he had a rough game against Minnesota. I thought his offense, his touch, his feel offensively was something I wasn't really sure how much to expect, but 11 points on 6 shots tonight. I'd kind of forgotten, like, hey, when he rolls to the basket, catches it like 8-10 feet out, like he's got nice touch in that range. He knows what to do, catches the ball down low, pump fakes, gets a blow by, throws in a dunk. 3-point shooting, we know he can obviously hit threes, hits 1 out 2 tonight. And even 2 assists from him, right? I think his offensive decision making has been a nice welcome sight. And I thought, you mentioned the minutes for Brook back up to 24, which is very interesting given that Giannis didn't even get 30 minutes tonight, and obviously it was a pretty comfortable game. So interesting seeing that they ramped up Brook all that the way to that. Bobby 22, Serge Ibaka 19. Very curious to see kind of how they manage those minutes moving forward. I think obviously, as we've discussed, the value of, in part, among other things, of starting Brook and Giannis is the fact that it's a little easier to stagger Bobby and Giannis, who are really kind of the only like pure power forward guys on the roster. But it was interesting kind of like how they balanced those guys. We saw Giannis go off with like 8 minutes to go in the first quarter and then come back a few minutes later, play the rest of the first. They were really Bud was definitely having to kind of go, let's say, short line changes with his big men to kind of keep them kind of going in and out and keeping all those guys playing. Will be interesting to see if that's something. I mean, how committed is he to that, right? Playing 4 big men once the playoffs start, and once you can play Giannis, 40 plus minutes every night, and that's the expectation. We'll see. But certainly seeing Brook pass another test, looking really good defensively, hits a couple threes, 10 points. Again, just very encouraging, kind of the progress that he's made. And I think I had some anxiety about what he would look like and how quickly we could expect him to look like the old Brook. I don't know if he's fully there yet, but I mean, he's damn close, right? I mean, he got thrown into the fire against Rudy Gobert in the first game back against Utah, and obviously showed some signs even as the Bucks got blown out on Saturday. And thankfully, already looking kind of close to the old Brook Lopez again. Knock on wood.
Well, the one thing you can't accuse the Bucks of when it comes to Brook Lopez is rushing him back. That's for sure. They before the surgery, they went to every length to try and avoid it. And they've said from the start, it was almost like and Zach Lowe was the one who had the reports that there was optimism that he would come back, but it was going to be late in the season. I think in the end, it maybe happened quicker than we thought, just because we were probably all looking at it thinking, well, is he even going to play? Is it just going to be a last-ditch regular season thing? But I think it's fair to say it doesn't look like they've rushed him back anyway. He does look pretty good. You mentioned he had 10 points tonight, which is interesting because if you're into fantasy basketball or props, then Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You know that I love Prize Picks because it's so easy to play. All you need to do is pick 2 to 5 players and an over and under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. And it's just you versus the projected numbers. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. It's safe, and you can get fast withdrawals as well. So you can use the award-winning app on both the App Store or Google Play. Prize Picks offers any prop you can think of, from points scored to rebounds and even steals, probably turnovers as well. So if not a great night for Giannis, as we've mentioned, but if you had the over there, you're probably in good shape. So all you have to do for a limited time, we've got this deal for you. Prize Picks, it's an exclusive, but a no-brainer of an offer for all our users. You get $50 for free if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point. But you have to use the code NBA to cash in on this deal. So that's right. If your player scores a single point, you'll get $50 free. Just use the code NBA. That's Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. Make sure you check out the Locked On Now podcast tomorrow. You can hear from everything that's gone on around the NBA. So you'll probably hear a sad report from Locked On Bulls. You'll hear me from Locked On Bucks, but you can do that after the game. You mentioned the bench a little bit, Frank, as we keep rolling through this game. I think the minutes are interesting, and we've spoken about the big man stuff and where that's going to lay out. Of course, you probably have 30-plus minutes of Chris Middleton to slot back in there. The starters' minutes were reduced a little bit. But we had old reliable George back tonight. 15 minutes plus 16 on the box score, which is just what we come to expect from him. No matter what the result, no matter what the score, win or lose, the Bucks tend to win the minutes with George Hill there. But I will say this, Javon Carter, and again, he's a smaller guard. It'll be interesting to see, come playoff time, where the trust level is, depending on what they want to do defensively, depending on the lineups. But he's not making it bloody easy for Bud to take this guy out of the rotation. He's still hitting those threes. I don't know who was defending him. I can't remember, but he crossed the shit out of one guy on the baseline there and knocked down the jumper as well. It's fair to say that he's been a pretty reliable player. I don't think that we could have sat here and predicted that we were going to get this level of consistency and reliability from a guy that they got for nothing at this point in the season. It's been pretty bloody good.
Yeah, I mean, he's been terrific, right? And the timing of getting him when George was out for an extended period due to the neck injury, couldn't have really worked out better. And I think, if you holistically think about that trade, right, trading for Serge, you're shipping out obviously a guy who has been, at times really good for you in Dante. This year, I obviously struggled coming back from the injury, but you're losing guard depth. And then to be able to use, the couple extra roster spots to use that to be able to bring in Carter, and obviously Bembry, a false start a bit with the unfortunate injury, and we really obviously didn't get to see a whole lot of him. But the fact that you were able to pick up Javon Carter as kind of a de facto like ancillary piece of that trade, and for him to be able to come in and immediately give you good depth at the guard spot and be a guy who, you look at, and as we've said, okay, you wanted a Jeff Teague replacement. Well, George Hill is the Jeff Teague replacement. But Javon Carter he's just making it really hard to not play him. And I think the upside of that is you don't have to play George extended minutes right now, right? I mean, you can ease George back into playing 15 minutes a game, something like that. Tonight he plays 16. And it's funny. I mean, you look at that bench, all the guys that played. Wes slots into the starting spot for Chris. 11 points, 4 out of 8 shooting, 2 for 4, really good defense. Barring injury, I think Wes is, I don't want to say a lock, but like Wes has to be part of the rotation given the way he is able to play defense on the wing. And then you look at those 5 guys that, the principal 5 that came off the bench tonight. Bobby Portis, obviously a lock, right? 3 out of 6 tonight, 6 points. Not a big revenge game for Bobby necessarily against his old team. He's been going through a bit of a shooting slump. He's 1 for 16 now, 0 for 1 from 3 tonight. He's 1 for 16 from 3 in his last 5. So hopefully Eric will say something about that, and then that usually, for whatever reason, tends to get Bobby out of his slump. But obviously Bobby's playing. Pat Connaughton, man, I mean, if Pat Connaughton breaks his right hand and then comes back, he has 15 points and 5 threes in his first game back tonight. 14 points, 3 out of 7 from 3, 4 out of 8 from the field, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, plus 20, no turnovers. I almost don't even want to talk about Pat Connaughton because I don't want to spoil anything. Like, it's just remarkable how he could suffer that injury and just come right back and still be the dead-eye shooter that he's been for most of this season. And by the way, the way he shoots those threes, where he doesn't even do the dip to bring it down. He just catches it high and just puts it up so the defense doesn't have a chance to really get a contest on it. I love that. I mean, that's just, there are other guys that do that, but that is just, working on your craft. So shout out to Pat for another really strong night tonight. But Bobby, Pat, George Hill, Serge Ibaka, Javon Carter. I mean,
it's 11 guys, Frank.
Something's got to give, right? And again, I thought, I think probably push comes to shove in the playoffs, Javon is probably a guy that doesn't play. And I guess Serge is again, are you going to play 4 real big men in the playoffs? We saw tonight with Chris out, Giannis played 3 for short stretches in the third quarter and first quarter. I don't think they're going to do that in the playoffs.
Could you ever see them going like, and again, it depends on the matchup, but this is the only question, because I've seen people on Twitter saying that, defensively, it's a pretty fearsome lineup. If you have Drew, Chris, Giannis, put Giannis on the perimeter, Serge and Brook. I mean, it's pretty outrageous in terms of size, but
well, you're not going to play Serge and Brook, right? You're going to play Bobby, Giannis, and one of those guys. Yeah.
But that's still, that's big.
Yeah.
Short stretches.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can, right? I mean, putting Giannis on threes, it kind of depends, right? Like putting Giannis on a 3. I mean, he was actually defending DeRozan at times tonight, and DeRozan's kind of an interesting matchup because it's like you're not like under pressure to guard DeRozan to like 25 feet, right? Because he doesn't want to shoot long threes. Although he did take 5 threes, made 1 tonight. So I think it depends a bit on the matchup. If there's a scenario where I'm trying to think of like Heat lineups, like
Butler, Tucker, Bam.
Yeah, like if you're playing Jimmy at the 3, right? And you could definitely play that grouping against the Heat because Giannis is really well suited to basically defending Jimmy because he knows that he doesn't have to go over screens really. And PJ is obviously not really a threat other than on the offensive board, so you can hide Giannis or Bobby, on him at any time.
Right.
And we know obviously the way that Brook can play against Bam as a drop guy. So yeah, I mean, I think there could be something there. And I think it's important, right? Like the more ways you can find the ability to keep Giannis on the floor, the better. So I think that's probably a little bit of what Bud's doing here is like kind of giving a look to that. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, I think maybe year 2 of Bud, they ran like I think there was like a week or two where like they ran the Giannis Ersan Brook group, I think for like spurts, and I don't remember it being particularly useful, but I think especially when it's Giannis, Bobby, Serge being a little bit more mobile obviously than Brook, I think that makes it kind of interesting because I think you're a little bit better able to if you have to scramble things like that, you actually have pretty solid mobility. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting, but again, just something's got to give here, and I think Bobby. I mean, again, it's just like Bobby, George, Pat, Wes have to play, right? And they're already up to 9, which is more than what we saw, during a lot of Bucks games, at least in terms of real minutes. So again, good problem to have. Fingers crossed that you actually have to make the hard decisions, and not that you're in a situation where one of your key guys gets hurt and then you have to play, and then you don't have the options. But I think certainly from a depth perspective, last year obviously was a huge challenge, especially after the DiVincenzo injury, just feeling like you had so few options that you trusted off the bench. And obviously this year you just cross your fingers that you can get through these last few weeks of the regular season unscathed, and that you've got options, different tools you can pull out depending on the opponent and depending on kind of what you're trying to do and the style that you're trying to play. But yeah, good opportunity to have, and just nice to see 2 guys hitting double digits from the bench for a change. Wow, what a nice sight to see.
Absolutely. And you will remember this game, Frank, and certainly our listeners will. And I only say that because I'm not 100% sure I've got these names right. But this game was in Utah where a bunch of guys were out of the lineup. And I think they started Chris, Giannis, Ersan, Mirotic, Brook.
Is that something like that? Yeah. And Christian Wood played in that game.
Something
and they had like a big second quarter lead, and then it kind of all went haywire as games tended to do in Utah. But yeah, that was the freaky big lineup night from Bud.
It was comical, but it was fun for one night only. Anyway, I'll tell you something that is not a joke, though, and that's Built Bar, our friends, the best tasting protein bar that's ever been made. It's good for you somehow, and it tastes ridiculously good as well. All bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They're low calorie, high protein. Just replace whatever other candy bar you're rolling with. Get rid of it and get a Built Bar because it's going to taste better, and it's also healthy for you, which is important, particularly as you get older like me, Frank. So go to built.com. You can scroll down the macros chart, and you'll be blown away because they are high protein and low calorie, as I mentioned, high fiber, low carbs as well. And maybe it's a mint brownie you're after, maybe a coconuts, maybe it's a white chocolate cookies and cream, whatever it is. They're all absolutely delicious, and they have new flavors coming out all the time. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. I wanted to give a bit of a shout out to Grayson Allen tonight, Frank, because I think Lisa pointed it out on the broadcast, but I think for good reason. He probably looked like he had some other things on his mind last time that they played in Chicago. And like I said earlier in the podcast, there was some talking going on. But tonight, he did look like a man that was perfectly at ease, back at 5-serve for him. And the interesting thing is, he only had 10 points in this game, but he was 5 for 7 from the field. He didn't even attempt a 3. And I would say some of the aggressive moves that he was actually seeking contact and finishing at the basket, we've seen him put the ball on the floor a little bit. And I think as we certainly earlier in the season made the comparison between him and Dante, we like the fact that he was a little more reliable in terms of being able to finish at the basket. But I don't really remember him seemingly looking for contact like he was tonight. And the fact that he did that tonight, I don't think it would be a coincidence that it was against Chicago that he was playing with a little bit of extra energy tonight, I would say. But it's a nice little development if this is the kind of stuff that Grayson Allen could pull out from time to time. I know it's late in the season. Like I said, to me, it was the first time I remember him finishing like this. But shout out to him because clearly still there would be some animosity with the Bulls. I don't think anyone was expecting anything to happen tonight. But he put his head down and went into the paint. He deserves some credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bulls really did look like they wanted to limit the three-point shooting Even against Giannis, right? Like when the Bucks were going on some of those runs, I think normally Giannis would have gotten in like a pull up three, a dribble up, early pull up three, at times in otherwise games where he's defended a little more loosely. But the Bulls were pretty intent on keeping guys up on even Giannis. So, they deserve some credit for that. But obviously, if you're Grayson Allen and teams are playing you for the 3-point shot, when it's not there, the fact that I think tonight he showed just, really good body control, calm, uh, skilled finishing around the basket, going left, going right, finishing with both hands. Started the game with a little floater. I thought that was obviously an encouraging sign because, we're talking about the rotation and who's going to play and who's not going to play. I think understandably we're taking it as a given that Grayson is going to play. I don't know if it's a given that he's going to start the rest of the year. I think he's going to start the rest of the regular season. I think there's absolutely scenarios where perhaps he does not start in a series in the playoffs. Like you think about a Kevin Durant Nets matchup. West got a start due to injury in Brooklyn the last time, and obviously he did a really nice job against KD. And again, you're largely the sacrificial lamb in those scenarios. But in a series where you really need to be good 1 through 5 defensively, I could certainly see a scenario where they might opt to bring Grayson off the bench. And so, he's had some ups and downs over the past kind of few months. Had those kind of that period where he was sick and kind of came back and was a little bit slow coming back from that. I think for him to get back into a rhythm, including not just shooting threes, is an encouraging thing. And certainly tonight, him getting off track, kind of getting off quickly and seeing some shots go down probably helped, because the weird part about that last game was, wasn't it like the third quarter before he even took a shot? So yeah, I think encouraging stuff from him. I think he's an adequate defender, but has generally not been, has not always looked to close with him, let's say. I think he's oftentimes had more comfort, going to Wes in particular as part of his closing group. And, we've seen Javon Carter close games, right? Like the Utah game where he was closing and making big free throws and all that. So I think certainly you can, I don't want to act like Grayson is, entitled to 23 to 25 minutes every night, regardless. I think he's also part of that group that is going to be fighting for, minutes from a playoff rotation standpoint. But yeah, I'd agree with you, kind of an encouraging performance from him tonight, showing that, he knows he can attack and get to the rim if a team is really kind of shading him hard to shoot those threes. So shout out to Grayson Allen, and, certainly not that it's like an individual battle with him and Alex Caruso, but, certainly Caruso did have 6 assists, but minus 11, 3 points on 1 out of 5 in 30 minutes. I think certainly he's still looks like a guy who's sort of trying to get some of his timing back. And obviously the impact just kind of wasn't there. And, again, Bucks put up, what did they put up from an offensive rating standpoint? 127. Bulls, again, the defense is obviously struggling mightily right now.
Yeah, well, if they, this is, as we spoke about the lineups, we've said it, the other guy obviously is Pat, who Bud really, really trusts. So I think, whether it's Pat, whether it's West, depending on whether Brook's on the floor, they've got a few options there, which is nice as long as they can stay healthy. By the way, you mentioned not shooting too many threes. What do you think in the first quarter of Serge Ibaka playing a little 2-man game with Giannis, little handoff, mid-range jumper, knocked it down? That's, I sort of laughed when I saw that, but I liked it. A long 2 from Giannis. That's Ersan like. There's no doubt about that.
Is that our bar? We just want Serge to remind us as much as possible of Ersan.
Listen, there's a few things have surprised me over the last couple of years with the Bucks. There's no doubt about that. But one of the biggest surprises is that Ersan hasn't made his way back to the Bucks, which I just always assumed was going to happen. But it looks like that ship might have sailed, which is
I was gonna say, we got George back, we got West back this year. I think if we're building the all-time like run it back Bucks, I could agree Ersan, because of overall tenure with the team, would have been sort of the ultimate, next guy to bring back. I still say you'd have to bring back Rolo before that, just because A, Rolo can actually still play NBA basketball, and B, we think about really the culturally, what was sort of the signature aspect of the year 2 Bud era Bucks. it was the pregame wrestling, and you had West back now. You're just missing Rolo. That was to me kind of the big piece that you were missing. Alas, Robin will not be reuniting with his brother and friends in Milwaukee, but I don't know that Robin cares a whole lot about that. We'll see.
Don't forget to check out the Locked On NBA podcast, national podcast on the network. They got you covered for everything going on around the league. One last note, and we haven't brought this up a lot. I have had a couple of people just mention this, and we've discussed it briefly in the DMs. Obviously, we've seen Tyreke Evans play with the Wisconsin Herd. I think he actually tweaked an ankle the other night there, but the Bucks do have a roster spot, Frank. So I wouldn't be against.
By the way, has anybody made a Tyweek his ankle joke? No, probably not. Sorry. When you said tweak, my immediate thought was Tyweek. That's fun to say, Tyweek.
Tyweek his ankle.
Tyweek his ankle. Sorry, go ahead.
No, we haven't brought him up a lot. I don't figure that he's going to be a part of the conversation, honestly. But I wouldn't be against just wheeling Ersan onto the bench for a championship run. And by the way, what's Elijah Bryant doing? Does he want to just win another ring? Does he want to show up in April and win another ring, or what's the deal?
Well, I think were we talking in the DMs the other day? Bucks do have an open roster spot, so the rule is if you sign a guy, if a guy was playing with another team and he gets released that season, then he has to be signed before maybe still March 1st. In order to be playoff eligible, right? That's why there's usually the end of March, typically, or the end of February is this kind of de facto deadline for doing buyouts, so that the guys can play for the teams that they sign with in the playoffs. Evans is unique because, like Elijah Bryant last year, Elijah Bryant, his salary number last year was $24,000 because he literally showed up in the last few days of the season, and his prorated minimum salary was basically nothing. So for a team like the Bucks that have an open roster spot, anybody you sign effectively is going to cost 4 or 5 times as much because of the whole luxury tax situation they're in. So, signing a guy who, would cost $200,000 for us this season suddenly becomes $1 million expense. But if you sign a guy on literally the last week of the season, then that number goes obviously way down. So if Tyreke Evans was, looked great, and perhaps more importantly, if the Bucks, for instance, had another injury to a wing, right, that might be the more important thing to watch out for. You could argue, hey, as long as Tyreke Evans knows his role and knows he's probably not going to play, you can do
knows his role and shuts his
shut the. As long as he doesn't say anything and just sort of blends in and is an option, I guess. Then you could use that sort of Elijah Bryant last 3 days of the season signing, and then he's your 15th guy and he's playoff eligible. But yeah, I don't know if that's likely to happen. But who knows, right? At least I will at least be keeping an eye on Tyweek Evans as he hopefully gets healthy and has a remaining little run out with the Herd here. But yeah, glad we really brought it full circle, man. We were able to get some Tyreke Evans scenario discussion in here, which I wasn't expecting. Also, the Bucks need to get everybody from that draft at some point, right? You think about the 2010 draft, I guess, right? 2010 was the draft.
Mills.
Was he in that draft too?
Yes.
Wow. Well, they've already had Brandon Jennings, Drew Holiday, Jeff Teague. They obviously now have a chance to get Tyreke Evans. And I don't know. They kind of keep going down the list of random guards.
DiColo. Is he still playing good?
Are you just going through the second round of that draft now? Do you have that draft in front of you or something?
Hey, Nando DiColo. I'm sure a few of our listeners are very familiar with his work overseas over the last decade there. And by the way, it was a shout out to The Rock earlier. Know your role and shut your mouth. Come on, it's one of the most famous lines that the Rock had. So shout out to The Rock. Maybe he can take the 15th roster spot. You
guys. Scott Hall was Razor Ramon, right? You guys were talking about him passing away the other day. You and Justin, okay. Yes. Or no, that was you and Camille, I guess, right? I think we're talking about that. Yeah. See, I used to watch. The only time I watched WWF at the time was like Saturday nights. They would play it, and I would watch Saturday Night Live, and then during commercials, I would flip over to watch WWF a little bit. So my big memories were I hated Ted DiBiase because he always was mean to kids. Like he would offer them money to do it, and then he would not let them do the 10th push-up or whatever, and then not pay them. And Razor Ramon I always found very, very amusing, with the toothpick hanging out the mouth. That's why it just throws me when I found out that his name was Scott Hall. It's like, Scott Hall, he's Razor Ramon. He's like, Italian or something. turns out these people are acting. Who knew, right?
I tell you what, he did a great job, by the way. He did an outstanding job at the character, Scott Hall.
Yeah.
Legendary stuff. All right, let's wrap it up. Speaking of Camille, she'll be on the podcast tomorrow, so I'll be hanging out with Camille.
Does she know that? Did you tell her already, or is this the bat signal for Camille tonight?
She knows now. No, wow. She does know. And I will say one final thought for the podcast tonight. Just something for the owners. Yes, you could spend $24,000 on a final roster spot, but just think how many Built Bars you could buy with $24,000. All right, we'll leave it there. For Frank and myself, see you guys tomorrow.